of nowhere. Oh,
I'm sorry, Dinaz. I just am recording it.
not not a problem. Went to college in Illinois, gained a big interest in agriculture, soil science, and then came back home. Did not want to settle in California or the Bay Area. I was very much not a tech person, and so wanted to go back to Iowa, work in soil science, eventually move back to Illinois. A lot of rejections later. I took a job as a consulting utility forester um, in the Bay, and ultimately my job just kind of blossomed from there. I never really thought I would be in this field. It's not something that I even knew existed, but I patrolled power lines with vegetation, made sure there were no hazardous trees in that area. Eventually fell in love with the work. Patrolled all around the Bay Area, from Gilroy up to the peninsula, to Milpitas. Eventually helped start up a new project in Mendocino County. Got my ISA certified arborist and then my tree risk assessment qualification as well. And then transitioned into disaster response. And so I was kind of just fire hopping for a bit. I worked on 5 different fires in California doing wildfire recovery. California has a program where after people lose their homes, we can come in, and if they sign up for the program, we do this work for free. We remove debris, and we also assess any trees that are hazardous to any public facilities. And then after that, came back home and managed the branch that I actually started out at in San Jose. And that project that we were working on just ended in December. So I took a month-and-a-half trip to India, and now I am currently trying to transition into a more consulting and residential role. So I'm applying to those jobs right now.
Dinaz, thank you. I saw Nitya's comment, wow. And really, wow is what sums it up at such a young age. I didn't even know there was a job called Arborist, and you're doing such an important work, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But let me ask Anita to do the same thing and tell our audience here, participants, about your background, Anita, and anything you want to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica, and thank you, Dinaz, and most of all, thank you to Deepika for inviting me into this forum. I don't have that much of a wow story, Dinaz. I was amazed at how you were able to weave in your work with plants and being an arborist with utilities and caring for the communities. I've had a very typical career in tech, started, many decades ago. Don't want to date myself with my young fellow participants here. But I started in a small startup when I first moved to the Bay Area. And I was a robotics engineer and then worked in DevOps, and we were automating US steel plants. And everything, when I look back, a lot of what I've done just seems to be accidental opportunities and then moving into that work. I mean, it was an accidental chance meeting with somebody, with a good friend at the US Educational Foundation, which is a library in Mumbai, and decided to come to the US for my graduate work. It was an accidental meeting with a woman entrepreneur back in the day who offered me a job in the robotics company. And from there, it was an accidental being assigned to a particular project manager who was very encouraging and encouraged me to publish in those days in the world of Unix, which was what triggered me to get a job at NASA Ames Research Center, where I worked on the numerical aerodynamic simulation program, the first supercomputer in those days, the Cray 2. And then another accidental move into Hewlett-Packard and, a long innings there. And finally, I think when I retired from Agilent and HP, it was more because my kids were young and I really wanted to spend more time with them. And an accidental meeting within 10 days got me to do a startup overnight. And I have so much appreciation for services like MyCorp, which allow you to just online register your company and get going. And that started my entrepreneurial journey. And it was a lab that we were doing analytics for that wanted to do more forensics and drug testing, that got me into looking at providing a lab automation software for test laboratories. And how lucky were we that that happened literally 6 months before COVID hit. So we saw this big uptick during COVID. And many people ask, what about Thai? I'm a relatively new entrant to Thai, only in the last 5 years. And a couple of my friends were in leadership positions, and I'd stayed away from Thai except being a panelist and, occasionally attending the conferences. And they convinced me that I have to be the change that we all wanted to see, which is a much more diverse Thai. And one thing led to another. So here I am, delighted to be spearheading the change that Thai is ready for, and the leadership and the founders of Thai, most importantly, want to see happen. The other things that are really dear to my heart are really education. So I serve on, education boards, but I also am very involved with the upskilling of workforce that happens through workforce investment boards throughout the country. And in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, we call it NOVA. And so I do serve on their board, and it really does work with youth, but it also works with displaced workers. And at this time, given the economic situation in the Bay Area and so many people, not having jobs, I know that some of our programs will have to, really go into fourth gear. So that's a little bit about me professionally. I have varied interests. Personally, I like to hike off trails. I like to golf, and I like to ski. And I'm a mom of 2 kids and love dogs.
Thank you, Anita. Quite a bit of accomplishments accidentally. I mean, it seems like that's been your theme, but we're going to dive more into some of the transitions you talked about, and specifically Thai, because some of the folks here may not be familiar with Thai, the organization, but I'm going to come to that in a moment. And so let me just, introduce myself as well to the participants here. I've been in technology for 25 plus years. Worked in all aspects of technology, from infrastructure, platforms, software as a service. And I also started out as a mechanical engineer. At that point, there was zero, I did not even know the technology space in Silicon Valley. And once I moved here, actually, even before I moved here, I realized that working as a mechanical engineer back in the factory, I did that for about 6 months to a year. And I realized I really wasn't cut out for that, to be in the back office in a factory. And there are many reasons for that. And if you have time, we can go into some of those. But my first transition ever in my life was, well, that wasn't the first ever. But one of the early transitions was, figuring out, what do I do now as a mechanical engineer when I really don't think that's the career I want to invest, for the rest of my life. So very quickly, I made a change into marketing and then moved to Silicon Valley and ended up being in technology space here, working on software, hardware, cloud technologies. And I would say the last 27 years, I've had a few other transitions we can get into as we go through the panel. I've also been involved in a lot of community work. Met Deepka, got involved in Indian Business and Professional Women, was on the board of Watermark. It was an organization that supported women in leadership. It's currently merged with an organization called Upward. So for many years, I was on the board there. Anita, I'm also deeply passionate about education. growing up in India, that was something very, very important to us. Our parents focused on education as a means to break barriers, as a means to get out of the box and do something different than what the rest of the family may have done till then. And so when I moved to the US, I realized, even though we thought of US as this country that's obviously very much, it's a lot more progress than the country we came from, but there's still very many pockets here where kids don't have equal opportunity and access to the same kind of education that others may be getting. So even in the Bay Area, so I'm part of an organization called City Year, the Silicon Valley San Jose chapter, and we work with the low-income school districts and provide them mentorship, provide them resources, mentoring, coaching, so we can help the kids access the same kind of resources that other school districts may have. Anyway, we'll go on more about this, but enough about me. I do have, of course, two amazing kids who I'm so proud of. I'm a proud mother, and we'll come to that as well, because I think navigating transition, especially when you're a parent, also adds. It's an interesting layer that it adds, right, to the transitions that we go through. So let's start with the questions around new beginnings. Dinaz, I'll start with you. I think in your introduction you talked about a number of things you did to get to where you're at as an arborist today. Tell us about your new beginning. How did you even choose this field that you're in, like in school? I mean, as a South Asian parent, I didn't hear of a job called the arborist that, a South Asian parent would say like, hey, yes, I want you to go become an arborist. Usually you hear parents talking about engineering, medicine, and of course, I hear lots of South Asian parents now also talking about arts and so on. But tell us about your journey and your transition from, like high school to like where you became an arborist. What was that like? Especially, how did your parents, respond to that when you said you're going to be an arborist eventually?
Yeah, well, my parents were very, very adventurous. They took me all around the world. And then were very confused when I wanted to pursue an environmental degree. So we compromised on environmental engineering. Environmental engineering is really nothing like environmental science. And so kind of ditched that in the beginning of college. And it was a bit rough for some time. They always kind of held on to this hope that one day, she'll see the light. I remember one time I took a Code Academy course on HTML. I made a clickable image box and I showed my dad, and he looked at it. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you don't want to do computer science?" And I was like, calm down. I made a box. It's not that exciting. It really took me working for quite some time and becoming established in my field, and then seeing that this was a viable career, and also seeing how much I loved the work that I do. And on top of that, a lot of, I think, our parents' fear comes from, the what will people say, and for them to, be with me at a lot of family functions and other functions, and for me to talk about my work and see the interest that other people had kind of helped them a bit. And now it's great. They'll ask me questions about the plants outside, and we live in an HOA association in a townhouse, and so sometimes I'll go outside, I'll just Google something, I'll say, here's what I think is wrong, and they'll email the home association and say, an expert diagnosed this, please take care of our plants. So a big thing, I think, is there's no real knowledge of what else is out there. Even for me, working in my field, I did not know about every single job I started until somebody reached out to me asking if I was interested. I had no idea about disaster response until I became true risk assessment qualified, and people started asking me if I wanted to do this. But all of these jobs, I really had to be established in my field to see what was out there. And that's really hard when you don't have anybody in your inner circle that is doing these jobs. There's this sense of, well, if so much of the tech world is based on connections, for somebody to go into a field that may not make as much as tech without those connections, it can be very scary. And one thing I'm so grateful for in my career is when I first transitioned into the disaster response world, my coworkers really were primarily old or middle-aged white men. And that can be very daunting for somebody my age. And the first thing they did within 1 or 2 weeks was ask me how much I was making, tell me I was underpaid, and essentially force me to go back to the person who hired me and demand a better wage. And so I really wouldn't be where I am today without those people. And so I'm just grateful that my career has a lot of support within the community, and I haven't had to look elsewhere to get that support.
Yeah, Dinaz, thank you for sharing that. Obviously, transitions and change are risky, but seems like you had a really good support system. You were able to show your parents that there is a career path through this transition that you're navigating. And I think for those of you here, and again, you know, we don't want to talk about age, but Dinaz is the same age as my son. So we're talking about a really young professional who's literally starting out in a career, you know, the last 2, 3, 4 years ago, right? So I think your story is very, very encouraging, Dinaz. I think for especially younger generation who are starting to navigate transitions very early on in your career, right? For some of us, you know, we had a decade or 15 years, and then there was a transition, then another 10 years, and then there's a transition. I think for you, your story is very interesting. And I think that's where the world is also moving to, is I think the younger generation is more willing to take the plunge, take the risk, move around a lot more, experiment with things, and come upon a role that they make their own, right? So I think definitely your story helps us understand that support is very important as well. And then finding allies. I love your story about the allies at work who were able to quickly tell you like, hey, you're underpaid. I think that's a fantastic story. Thank you for sharing that. Anita, let me move to you. And again, when we were chatting earlier about in preparation for this, I know you have so many different milestones and transitions you've navigated. Maybe talk to us about moving from a corporate leader to becoming an entrepreneur, because it's a whole different world. Like, what happened? What were your concerns as you were getting into it? How did you navigate sort of the risks that you thought were going to happen from moving from this like nicely defined corporate role to entrepreneur, which is all hell breaks loose, right? Literally.
So, you know, I think that's a great question. And I became an entrepreneur not because I had this great idea. I was actually sitting, helping a friend. We went to a law firm who had a lot of analytics work, and, you know, it involved some data science, and there was a lot of data that we had to deal with. And I was my animated self when, you know, you're just kind of talking about, oh, this is possible, that's possible. And the next thing you know is these partners said, okay, so will you do it? And, you know, I'm a big believer in fate and destiny. And I have no idea. I mean, I had just left my current job maybe 2, 3 weeks before, and I have no idea why I said yes. And then when I went home, I realized what that yes meant. It meant that I had to put a team together. I didn't have a company. I didn't even have a business card when I went to meet these folks. And so that was a little, it was scary, but it was also that there was already a client, which was a little different than the second transition within the same company to a product. So as long as you're doing services, you know, it's hard to fail because you've got clients who pay for your operations and the people that they hire, or the people that, you know, are providing the service. So that transition was not that heavy, but the one thing that does come to mind is, you know, in my corporate career, I did a lot of transitions, new initiatives, but you always have the safety net of the corporation. You
Yep.
always know that if your new initiative that you want it to be successful, you want it to be successful for your own self-esteem and for the team. But if it's not like you lose your job, you know? I mean, everybody will find other spots in a 50,000 person, base. There'll be something for everyone to do.
Right.
But in a startup, you hire, you've got 30 people initially, you're sitting and you say, if I can't get enough revenue, I have to worry about how I'm going to keep people's jobs. So that was the big transition, is constantly trying to stay ahead of the curve. And I think the second piece, the transition when we moved to being a product solution provider, was really talking to our key clients for whom we were doing services in the laboratory space and understanding really what were the gaps.
Right.
And then it's a roll of the die, right? Because you don't know what the competition's doing. They're probably having the same conversations. They're, charging right ahead to build the same kind of capabilities to service the market. But you have to have a leap of faith and a conviction, I think, when you do these things. And as I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, I mean, I do a lot of investing, and, of course, in my current role in TIE, I meet a lot of young and aspiring entrepreneurs. And I am just blown away by their conviction and their belief in what they are doing. And I think that's a really important thing. And I know somebody earlier in the chat said passion. I mean, you are passionate about an idea. And I look at myself, and I've always been passionate about delivering value or being successful at what I do, not necessarily where it'll lead me to. And that's why a lot of my terms of, accidentally coming up with things, because you just focused on what I'm doing now. And entrepreneurs have a great ability to take that risk too, which is huge.
Yeah, I mean, definitely conviction, belief, and I think courage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think anytime you are taking a leap of faith and you are transitioning and changing up your life a lot or completely, in some cases, it does take a lot of courage. I think it also takes a support system. I want to get there. Maybe I'll relay a little bit of my story too here in terms of transitions, a new beginning for me as an example. I remember this was way back when my son was 6 months old. Actually, he must have been 3 months old. So I was a new mother for the first time. And I had a job as an individual contributor at a company. It was fine. But I knew, like many of us here, I really wanted to do more, and had that passion in me that I want to seek more opportunities, do bigger, better things, more impactful things. So at that point, Oracle, which is, a huge company in the tech industry, they approached me for a role in their team. And I still remember, my son was maybe 4 months old then. And I remember my colleagues at my current company saying, "Are you crazy? Do you want to go to a company that's really going to eat your life?" The reputation was Oracle, the big, bad, evil empire. You're going to go there with a little baby. You're not going to survive. Why are you changing? And I really, after assessing the opportunity, I really wanted to do it. I don't know why. I mean, if I had just thought of it logically, I would have said, for the next 2 years, I have a little one. I'm just going to focus on kind of maintaining my job and whatnot. But I actually took the leap of faith. I moved to Oracle, and the rest was history for me. I felt like I just learned so much in that company, and was able to really create a space for myself, and also kind of figure out who I am as a professional and as an individual, and what kind of a leader I am. So that's one of my stories. And of course, we'll sprinkle more, but I do think I had the courage. But what I also had was a support system. And I want to talk about that now with both of you. So obviously, there are many people in this world who have to do transitions, have to create new beginnings, and they may not have the support system. There are many such stories. But I also want to talk about the value of a support system while you're navigating change and transition. And so, Dinaz, I'm going to ask you this question. So how in your mind, I mean, you talked about your parents, but walk me through, like, what kind of support did you get as you were transitioning? And we're going to talk about also your transition from the current industry to a new industry, but tell me about the role of support system, right, in the last few years for you as you've navigated to different transitions in your career. Anything,
Yeah.
your family, friends, anything you want to share?
My friends have always been very supportive of my work, which I'm so grateful for. And in my industry, it's been a very positive experience. Most of my career has been pretty 50-50 women, aside from disaster response. And my bosses in the beginning were all women, and they were really the ones who encouraged me to pursue higher certifications. And so really I have 3 certifications in my field, and it's mostly because of them that they were the ones who showed me what was available, signed off on my paperwork, gave me free study materials, all of that, marked my exam dates in their calendars, asked me how it went.
Yeah.
And really everything in my field, yeah, I've had to interview for, maybe I've had to persuade some people and fight a little bit for that imposter syndrome that I felt, but I have never really felt the need to compete against anybody in my field for positions that have been available. They're pretty open, if somebody gets a job offer and they are not interested, it gets shared among the entire team. And so that is probably one of my favorite aspects of the field that I'm currently in. And it's something that I've really tried to pass on to my team, as well as, my other friends, trying to be a little bit more transparent with salary, with opportunity, especially younger siblings or family friends that are maybe interested in an environmental field, being frank about the opportunity out there and what you can expect in those positions. And as well as my college, a lot of my previous, classmates as well, it really was great to have them around, going to a college in Illinois, and especially one that is so diverse in what it's about. Great engineering school, great agricultural school, not really focused on one or the other. You were exposed to people who weren't in the tech world, who came from farms and came from rural backgrounds and had very different goals, and learning that is a very acceptable way to pursue the rest of your career and live your life has been great for me. And definitely in a world like here, where at least I attribute a lot of my self-worth to my career, which I'm trying not to do as much, it's nice to have coworkers who don't.
Yeah, I think, Dinaz, what at least what I'm getting from what you're saying is that it's okay to ask for help too, and okay to seek advice and mentoring and really the support system. I think one of the things I've had to learn personally is to ask for help has been very difficult, because we come from a culture, at least the way I was, brought up, was like, we just do things. And especially I think as women, and I don't want to stereotype all women, but I think we kind of have this syndrome that we can do it all. And I think we carry it with us at work, in our personal lives. And I've had to work on myself to ask for help. So I'm really glad to hear you say that you've had an extensive support system that's helping you navigate through your transitions so far. Yeah, Nithya, you're right. Or the notion that people will think less of us if we ask for help. We are somehow not enough if you're asking other people for help. Anita, your point of view on this? Would love to hear that too. Oh, you're muted, I think, Anita.
Sorry, first, I think the support question that you asked and that Dinaz spoke so eloquently too. I'm a firm believer that no race is won alone. And it's not a race worth running if you're not running with a team. And whether it is your co-workers, whether it is your sponsors, supporters, but I just feel so blessed. I mean, right from the get-go, the fact that my parents took that leap of faith and let me go to the United States alone to pursue my studies. I mean, that was a hell of a lot of support. And then, I mean, just having those mentors in my first company, and then having the opportunity to have worked at NASA Ames, having good managers. And in my case, they weren't all females. I mean, none of them. I was, they were all men. And so when I think of a glass ceiling, I really don't think about the glass ceiling. This question was asked to me by a forum of women at Hewlett Packard many, many years ago. And they said, what do you think about the glass ceiling at HP? And I said, what glass ceiling? Because not that we don't see aspects of it. We're all adults. You see the aspects. But I'm a believer that if you don't focus on it, you will charge forward, doing the right thing. And ultimately, doing the right thing is important. Creating value is important. And that's what makes you move forward. Not worrying too much about, am I getting my fair share? That was my generation. We focused on that aspect. And therefore, as years moved on, people could actually then talk about, hey, it's my right to have this. I have equal right, and I am just as good, and therefore I deserve even better. I don't think that I was so focused on that aspect, but I was very fortunate. There were a lot of great managers and support systems. My parents, my family, my kids were a tremendous support. My husband, and most importantly, I would say my girlfriends, one of whom is on the call, I see. So, it's just amazing that, to have other women rallying with you, behind you, giving you that advice of, gee, you should be doing XYZ more, or don't keep apologizing all the time when you don't need to, simple things like that, that friends will tell you, girlfriends will tell you that, and real friends will tell you that. So I think support is a huge, huge element in folks' success. And I actually believe that it is the universe's way of making things happen for you by sending, whether you call them angels or forces that come into your life to kind of, shape that journey in a particular way. And so that's my question on support. And somebody asked the question of, you think it's good to send children away from home? I think the best thing that happened to me was that my parents let me fly away so far away. This was in the days of trunk calls, I mean, we didn't have, you couldn't just lift up the phone and call. And it was the best growing up experience. It was scary. I mean, it was my first plane ride. I was the daughter of a railway officer who was an engineer. We always traveled luxuriously in trains, but I'd never sat on an airplane before. That was scary. That was a huge transition. Meeting people from different parts of the world at a university was a transition. And so I think that, it is a good experience. I really did encourage my children to go to the East Coast when they were going to school. Both of them landed up in Southern California, and I wish they had flown away further away, but they're great kids. They're doing well. So, no worries. My daughter lives in New York now, so she's fulfilling that dream.
Anita, very well said. I think the role of support system, whether it's, friends, as you mentioned, professional colleagues, sponsors, champions, mentors is extremely important as we navigate transitions both in personal and professional life. I mean, I have my story. My parents moved in with us when our kids were young. And for almost 15 years, they live with us. And I cannot tell you what that gave me wings to fly and to do things in my career that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And I know it for a fact. Um, is it something that I, thought like, oh, I should not do because it's going to change my life? I mean, yeah, we all made adjustments, right? But that was a choice we all made. And I benefited from it tremendously. So I do believe, as both of you said, as you're navigating transitions in life, it's so important to have your champions and sponsors, your friends and family and professional colleagues all around you. And don't be afraid to seek them out, right? Build that up. You have to invest time and energy and resource into building that support system. It doesn't just happen automatically. Yeah, I think there's a lot we can talk about here, but I'm also looking at the clock here. We are, about 15 minutes to the end. So maybe I'll ask maybe one quick question, Anita. I'll ask you because we talked about TIE a lot. It's the Indus. I don't know if you still call it the Indus Entrepreneurs. Maybe you can spend a couple minutes talking about what is TIE, but more importantly, it's a big transition for the organization because they now have their first female president, which was unheard of. I have my own experiences with TIE. I think it's a fabulous organization, but we all know that it was very different. And I somehow thought it wasn't for me. Like I didn't see people like me represented. So I would love to hear your journey there and tell us about what you're thinking of as that now that you're the president of TIE.
So, I completely understand where you're coming from, Monica. I too thought that a few years ago. But, I truly believe that you have to be part of that change. And now that the Thai community has entrusted me with the responsibility of laying that foundation for the next several decades. We've been around for 30 years, fostering entrepreneurship. We've grown across the globe. We've created hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth across the country with fostering entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs who've done extremely well. But, now I think it's the time to really focus, and this is where my focus is that we are beyond just being South Asian. Many of us who are on the call today are probably we're the first in our families to have come here. But it's time now that we focus on the next generation. Organizations like TIE need to serve and be served by the next generation, which means that next generation has to be, TIE has to be reflective of the demographics that we are operating in. And our children are first American. I am first American. I'm a flag-carrying American citizen. But yes, we have ties to India. Our children feel a lot less of those ties. And there is nothing wrong with that. So therefore, my responsibility is to make sure that the value of TIE is taken to all of Silicon Valley and all of the country where entrepreneurship and the lessons of entrepreneurship, whether it is in education, in mentorship, in bringing together corporate decision makers to young entrepreneurs so they can get their pilot projects and they can get that first buyer, getting the investors together with the entrepreneurs, all of that has to happen at a larger scale in a much more inclusive way so that TIE is representative of the demographic that we operate in, which means more of the Asians, more of the non-Asians, and that's what we're doing. And for the past 2-3 years that we've been involved, we've had tremendous support. We're bringing in a lot more of the venture capital community into the mix. We're bringing a lot more diverse speakers, and it's not that it's not about being one ethnic group or another. It is more to be representative of what the Valley needs. And the Valley needs more people who are getting more connected and more entrepreneurs who are getting connected. And the entrepreneur of today is a little different than the entrepreneur 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's my focus. And I think the other piece of it is that, everybody talks about diversity. People see the first woman president and they expect that, there's this whole focus on women. And I am deeply committed to make sure that all of us can be part of this journey together.
Yeah.
But it is not a key initiative.
Right.
Just the same sense of what I felt when I was at Hewlett Packard, that, you don't worry about the glass ceiling, you just keep moving forward and being inclusive, and then things will start to make a difference. I am so proud of the fact that today the Thai board is 50% women. I mean, my colleagues, Mini Suri and Kritika Reddy, I mean, amazing. They're all amazing leaders. And, so Thai is already there. And what we need now is really the focus on the next generation and to bring young, aspiring entrepreneurs and to bring young professionals like Dinaz into the fold to share to share her inspiring story and to inspire others.
Yeah, Anita, I'm so happy to hear the transformation you're driving there. And I'll say this, I in the interest of time, I mean, I've also been in positions where, running a $20 billion portfolio marketing at Oracle, now the chief marketing officer at Hitachi Vantara, we do sometimes feel that we are one of the few, there who are driving the transformation. And sometimes it can be hard, but I go back to the conviction, the belief, the courage that we all have been talking about, right? I think we have to continue to remember the reasons why we put ourselves in this position. Not just we are going through transformation in our life, but we're also driving, I think, a lot of transformation and impact, right, in the areas that we are working in. And that's what really makes me happy when I see somebody like Dinaz also following that path and working in a field where, as you said, there's, different sort of demographics that you landed into, but look at you, you are right there, you are working with them, you are, they've become your champions and sponsors, which is like really great to hear. So Dinaz, I'm going to ask you, maybe this will be our last question, and if we have some time, we'll come back. But tell me about, any kind of lessons learned, any tips, any advice you want to give the audience here and in general to younger generation about how to navigate, maybe as a woman, also the male dominated, areas and roles that we see out there. So, and I'm asking you a lot, but, if you can spend maybe 2 or 3 minutes summarizing that would be great.
Absolutely. As a woman, I have not faced too much sexism within my own community. I have faced a lot of it working with the public. A lot of people who are homeowners that I would talk to maybe wanted to speak with a man, especially difficult when my own team would have to escalate things to me as a manager, and they didn't want to listen to me any more than they did my older male coworker, especially because the team I managed, a majority of them were significantly older than me. And it's just one of those things where you know that you know what you're talking about. I'm grateful that the majority of my community has been so supportive of me that I don't really deal with that imposter syndrome. I think it would be a different story if I were constantly having to prove myself within the field as a whole. And then I think in terms of following what you're interested in, my work has been so demanding. I was out in the middle of nowhere in a bed and breakfast that had a power outage every day because we were working in an area that didn't have power because there were fires. Living in a trailer at times, working 80 hours a week and coming home and studying for another certification. And I was having the time of my life. I had no free time. And I could not have been happier, just because I was so interested in the work that I was doing, and I saw such a discrepancy in my coursework, the courses that I took trying to be an engineer versus the courses I took more towards what I was actually interested in, and not only the grades that I got, but just the stress level of being in the class, the interest of being in that class. And the more removed I get from college and the more secure I get and established I get in my field, the more I realize that I made the right choice. It's just one of those things where when you look at what you want to spend the next 30, 40 years of your life doing, does it fill you with dread, or are you excited at what you're going to be able to accomplish in those years? And one thing about me is, even when I'm off the clock, so much of my job is still out there. It's a really great thing, I was working 6 days a week, and I would spend my seventh day still hiking in the forests, still kind of working, still analyzing what's out there. It's one of those fields where it's just all around us, and I'm so interested in continuously learning more. And I think if you have something that makes you feel that way, or at least a field where you're interested in the subjects that you're learning, sometimes, yeah, courses are going to be hard, obviously, in whatever field you choose, even if it's one you like. But if it really interests you, it'll be a different kind of pain suffering through those classes. And if you like what you do, you'll be okay. It's important not to look at the salaries that are posted on Glassdoor, because they don't know what they're talking about. It's a base, and it's a base position that they'll take for the medium jobs all across the country. And it's really important that there's so much out there that you have no idea until you really establish yourself in your field.
Yeah, Dinaz, thank you for that perspective. I mean, I know it's a cliche, follow your passion, but in your case, look at you, you've created a whole new role that I know I had never heard about. And I think it's such a fabulous role that you've created. I know we don't have enough time to talk about sort of you transitioning from utilities to a different industry. So you are navigating yet another transition. So maybe we'll come back at some point. But Anita, I want to go to you now. Any sort of tips, advice, lessons learned as you've navigated these transitions?
I think, firstly, it's okay to be vulnerable. Having fear of change is okay. Brushing it aside means, for me, I feel like I spent a lot of time brushing it and saying, no, everything's fine. But that took me away from acknowledging and then dealing with how do you deal with the issue, right? And how do you muster up the courage, the support that you need in order to deal with it? So being vulnerable, I think, being empathetic as we work with our teams in our jobs, as we make changes, as we lead change. And then most of all, something that comes to mind is something that I live by, is what my dad would always say to me is, when you fall, don't spend time crying, get up right away, brush off the dust from your knees and start running again. And that's something that I really do try to live by, is, I try to be conscious if I'm saying, why did this happen to me, is to kind of check that and then, try to move forward. So to me, that's important. I love the fact that Dinaz said, you just love what you do, and sometimes it's hard. And it is hard. It's even though I have the sponsorship and the support of the Thai leadership, and I have a great board, and it's all very good, but change is always difficult, and people will resist change, not because they want to oppose you, but because things have moved along okay for a while. So why change? And I don't believe that each one of us, when we are given, or when we are put in a situation where we have to do something, that something must deliver value, and that something must create value for everyone in the organization, be it your customers, your constituents, your fellow members. And that's, something that I think is important, sometimes difficult to keep in mind all the time, but I try my best.
Thank you, Anita. Very wise words. Maybe I'll sum it up. We have 2 minutes. If there's any other comments, please write them in chat. We've really enjoyed reading all the comments. Change is difficult. Change is scary, right? Change is, there are unknowns associated with change. But what I'm hearing from our panelists is there's a lot of great accomplishments at the end, and it depends on what you define as those accomplishments, right? So I think my advice is don't forget to celebrate the small successes and milestones, right? Often you don't have to set yourself up towards a linear career or linear life path just because everybody around you is doing that. I think change has such great potential for progress in your own life and also the society. I think, when we look at around us, the way we made progress is because somebody decided to change something we were doing in a status quo way. So I'd say let's embrace the change. Let's find the support system we need to help us navigate through the difficulties to get the courage, right? Let's have a conviction and belief and continue to navigate these transitions as Anita and Dinaz are showing us that we can do this. But remember to celebrate the successes too. That's what I would say. So with that, we've come to the end of our panel. I had so many more questions, by the way, because based on the conversation with Dinaz and Anita, there is a lot more to these ladies here. But maybe over a cup of coffee or wine, one of these days, we'll get together and talk more. Really, really appreciate you both joining us.
Absolutely. And Dinaz, all the very, very best to you.
Absolutely.
Well, congratulations on your new position. It's really incredible.
Thank you. And I look forward to featuring you as the young person who's navigated her career in a new field and married it with engineering. I'm sure your dad feels happy about working with utility grids.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I know, Reed, you want us to stay back, so we will. The panelists, if you can just stay back. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you
All
for
right.
listening.
Thank you. Great job.
Bye.
Yeah, I would love to take a photo. I was taking pictures individually of you, but I realized if other people get off, I'll be able to take